Yes, Brady Cook's biggest critics last season were wrong. And no, I'm not sorry for pointing that out. But that doesn't mean Cook is beyond constructive criticism. So let me clarify further. Coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the merchant of Missouri football and basketball mirth here 5 days a week on the Locked On Podcast Network. On today's show, I focus a lot in the offseason about how boring kickoffs have become in football. I got to say, punting and punt returns has become just as bad, if not worse, I'm starting to realize. But before we start the program, it's time for an energy boost. And 5-Hour Energy fixes tired fast with zero sugar and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. And apparently I got a few people's goat out there in the Missouri podcast land talking about Brady Cook yesterday. And specifically, I think the comment where I said, well, some of his critics have scurried out from under their rocks after Cook missed a couple deep balls on Saturday. Well, on Thursday, I should say, actually. Well, obviously I was being a little bit humorous there. I was trying to be funny. Some people did not take it that way. And here's the thing. The people I was specifically criticizing are the people who, and by the way, not just the people who booed Brady Cook in week 3 pregame before the Kansas State game. I'm talking about people that I actually talked to in the offseason, the summer of 2023. I mean, just about every time somebody would meet me at an event, something like that, and go, oh, you do a Missouri podcast? Well, let me tell you something. I don't know about this Brady Cook kid. I heard it all the time. And you know what? Those questions were fair. But at a certain point, you just have to take the L and admit that you were wrong. And it's okay to be wrong, especially when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks. Heck, I was watching the USC-LSU game last night. Matt Leinart was on the sidelines for the Trojans, dapping people up. Well, guess what? I thought Matt Leinart was going to be a stud NFL quarterback. I was wrong. Stuff happens. So as much as I love to pat myself on the back for Pat Mahomes and how right I was from his jump from college to the pros, stuff happens. Once again, the God's honest truth is quarterback evaluations from level to level especially are really, really hard. Once those guys get to the NFL for a season or two, once they're in college for a season or two, it becomes clear pretty quickly who the good players really are. But going from high school to college to the NFL, well, that's a lot trickier. I was a big fan of Tyler Macon, for example, when he came out of high school to East St. Louis and said so on this podcast. Obviously, that take didn't age very well. So over the years, one thing I've learned, I'm not going to do hot takes on high school quarterbacks anymore. I'm done with that market. I've said I like Matt Zollers. I think he's got good potential. I'm not going to go out and tell you he's the next great quarterback at Missouri until I actually see him play college football. But back to Brady Cook. I want to give you an example of what I think. I want to try to clarify something here by giving you an example, because a lot of people, I think, when I said scurry from out under their rock, I think everybody who had a constructive criticism of Brady Cook, I think some of those people thought I was talking about them. But no, I'm specifically talking about the people where it seems like it's more important for them to have their quarterback takes validated, no matter how wrong they seem to be a year into Brady Cook's, really his second year into college football as a starter, now his third year. one game in. It seems like it's more important to them to have their takes validated and make themselves out to be some quarterback guru than it is for Missouri to actually win ball games. So to me, there are legit criticisms, of course, of Brady Cook. And my old friend Mizzou Mike 03 on Twitter said, quote, "After rewatching the game, Brady needs to be better. I have full confidence that he'll meet or exceed the standards we've set for him this year. But in addition to the struggles with the deep pass, I thought he stared down his receivers too often." Well, to me, that's all fair, for sure. I didn't necessarily notice the staring down the receivers part, but most of that is because, frankly, against a team like Murray State, your first read is usually going to be open. Missouri throws a lot of wide receiver quick passes too. Hard to look off when you're immediately getting the ball out of your hands. But either way, we can quibble and discuss that further, but either way, this is the type of comment and or tweet about Brady Cook or any other Missouri player that doesn't bother me really in the least. Again, I can disagree with some of that assessment. I can agree with some of that assessment. What bothers me is when I'll give you another specific example. There was somebody in my YouTube comments who is calling Brady Cook NAIA Brady. Like, I mean, come on. If you're less of a fan of Brady Cook than me, you have some concerns you want to point out, great. But to act like he's not a Division I or even Division II quarterback, apparently, that's just absolute insanity. And you know what? If that person is a Jayhawk in disguise or something like that, and I've been had, then I apologize. And that would certainly explain a lot. No question about that. But more to the point here, last episode I talked a ton about Brady Cook, and I have to admit I did contradict myself a bit at the end of that first segment, because I started off my show by saying, hey, Brady Cook missed some deep balls, but I'm not worried about it at all. Well, at the end of my segment, I said, well, he does have a tendency to sail balls in the intermediate area that's a little bit more worrisome to me. To be quite honest with you, that was me thinking in real time. That's what was happening there. It was also me remembering in real time, oh yeah, Brady does have a bit of a tendency to sail those balls in the intermediate part of the field. And that's legitimate. And again, just to clarify what I was saying specifically, I'm just not worried about the deep ball accuracy, because I thought Cook showed last year that he's pretty adept at that particular pass, over the top of the defense to Marquise Johnson, Luther Burden, off play action passes, that type of deal. But again, the intermediate stuff where he tends to overthrow it a little bit, maybe hang back on his back foot a little bit too often, I think that's a legitimate constructive criticism. According to SEC StatCat, by the way, Cook was 3 of 10 for 54 yards in the ball game on passes 10 yards or longer. Obviously, that doesn't look great on paper, but again, that ball that, for example, Marquise Johnson gets his hand on, if Cook is then 4 for 10 for 100 yards and a touchdown, well, it looks a lot better and a lot more similar to what you saw from Missouri on those type of deep shots last season. So, again, I'm simply just tired of the hyperbolic overreactions by some of these fans, and mostly their need to be right instead of Mizzou actually winning. These people need, in my opinion, humble yourselves a little bit, just like I've had to over the years, and realizing, oh, wait, just because I was right about Patrick Mahomes and several other quarterbacks over the years, I've got my L's as well, from Tyler Macon to Matt Leinart to Vince Young. It's tough out there for quarterback evaluations. So again, it's also tough out there just to be a quarterback. If you want to have criticisms of Brady Cook's game, I'm fine with that. But the name calling, that kind of stuff, just the over exuberance, the over whatever word I'm trying to say and failing to come up with here, just let it breathe. Let Brady Cook be Brady Cook. He's not NAIA Brady. He's an SEC quarterback, folks. He's SEC Brady. That's what we need to keep in mind. Is he as good as Carson Beck? Is he as good as Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers? That's a whole other discussion. But I don't know. Missouri fans, he is a true son. He is one of ours. Let's just keep that in mind. These players do read stuff online, and if your need to be right outweighs the need for Missouri to win, I don't really need you to be a Missouri fan, quite frankly. And speaking of constructive criticisms, it would be fair to point out that Missouri probably had a few too many penalties on Thursday night. So is this a trend? Is this something to worry about? Is this just early season jitters? Well, I have quite a few thoughts on the topic coming up here in just a little bit. First, though, let's power through the rest of the show with 5 Hour Energy. And if you have some labor to do on Labor Day, like I do, maybe you want to get in shape but are having trouble staying motivated, well, make 5 Hour Energy shots part of your lifestyle and get the energy boost you need to get fit. We all know sometimes you don't want to go to the gym. Well, take a 5 Hour Energy shot to give you the feeling and alertness you need to power through your workout. And like I said, doing labor on Labor Day, well, 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like us have trusted for more than 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling that we need to get through a busy, hectic day. So, go to 5hourenergy.com. That is the number, 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today. Use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Offer valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Chris Gordy's Locked On SEC for the look at the rest of the conference and the occasional appearance by yours truly as well. Again, that's Locked On SEC on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Well, Missouri with 9 penalties in the game, only 7 of them were accepted against Murray State. Most of them were by offensive linemen, which is generally the case. It was sort of a good thing that Missouri was able to defend so well without any real notable pass interference, holding penalties. There may have been 1 or 2 in there that I'm forgetting, but for the most part here, again, 3 holding penalties and 3 false starts were the lion's share of the penalties by Missouri. So it was the offensive line. And you know, 2 of those false starts were by Logan Reichert, the Raytown product, who is a backup. I think most of us think Reichert's got a really bright future. Obviously, we hope he doesn't play much this season, simply because that would mean, well, there's probably an injury by one of the first-string guys. So, again, just for some context there, 2 of the 3 false starts were by a backup player. And when it comes to holding penalties, I do make a pretty good distinction personally between holding penalties and false starts. It's a good example of penalties of aggression and penalties of just brain farts, for lack of a better term, because I feel like personally false starts are always bad. I'm kind of shocked that they don't happen more often, though. Honestly, credit to offensive linemen in general for having so much on their plate, having to figure out who I'm blocking, knowing the calls, all this different stuff. And then, okay, we're changing up the snap count all the time too. Considering you have 5 different human beings and variables there, it's surprising that that doesn't happen more often. But obviously, there's never such thing as a positive false start for the most part. The only thing I can really think of there is Jawan Taylor for the Kansas City Chiefs the past couple seasons. Well, really just the last season for the Chiefs, but even previously with the Jaguars, you may remember right tackle Jawan Taylor was getting a bit of a quick start, not a false start because it wasn't called. It's not a false start if it's not called, but boy, to the naked eye, it sure looked like there was a lot of false starts that were not called by Jawan Taylor. But that is the exception to the rule. More often than not, it's just a false start or it's not. You're not really getting an advantage there. That's in contrast to holding penalties because, well, basically holding, if you look at it, if you consider holding just grabbing onto somebody's jersey, for example, well, you could call holding on every single play. You really could. Now, of course, by the book, these days, that in and of itself is not a holding penalty. Simply grabbing onto a guy's jersey is legal. It's just, if you tug him, that kind of deal, you grab onto him, impede his progress, that type of deal, then it's technically a holding penalty. The point I'm trying to make here is obviously there's a heck of a lot of gray area there between, you're the legal grabbing and the illegal grabbing of a defender. The point is, a lot of times Missouri offensive linemen in general, are going to be getting away with holding penalties. You can go step over that line a little bit and get an advantage if the flag doesn't come. That doesn't really happen with false starts. So my point is, while holding penalties are never good, obviously, what we can't see is the other side of that, which is there's no statistic for how many holding penalties you got away with, how many times you got away with a hold that allowed a guy to get an extra 10 or 15 yards, and maybe allowed your quarterback to escape a sack, that type of deal. That's never in the box score. I've never seen anybody even attempt to actually quantify that. I don't know if you can whatsoever, but there's no doubt that that is a part of the calculus there in terms of, hey, if I'm an offensive lineman, I'm going to try to step over the line occasionally, and if the referees are going to keep letting me get away with it, well, obviously that's to my advantage. So holding penalties, individually, always bad. They're drive killers. But how many are you getting away with? That's the part where I don't want to totally overanalyze those particular fouls. And apparently my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook are maybe impressed by Missouri, not impressed by the Buffalo Bulls. Either way, Tigers minus 34.5-point favorites for Saturday's ball game against Buffalo. That is a massive, massive spread for an FBS opponent, and a lot of respect for the Tigers, and, well, clearly some disrespect for the Bulls as well. 51.5 is the total, and I gotta say, the way Missouri's defense looked last week, the under is pretty tempting at first glance. I'll have to do some more research on Buffalo for tomorrow's show, and I'll give you probably a final take on whether I think you should take the under total 51.5 for this week's coming game. And while obviously football is going to be the huge focus for me this time of the year, I have been noticing one basketball discussion popping up quite a bit in the Missouri online discussion forums here, and that's about Caleb Grill, the Missouri shooting guard from last season. I've just noticed a lot of split opinions on Grill, and I'll just say I'm mostly positive on Grill, though I do understand people who have questions about Grill's game right now. To me, though, there's really two things that we need to worry about Caleb Grill for 2024-25. First of all, obviously the three-point shooting. At 29% last season for Grill, that's just frankly not going to cut it, although obviously his season was cut short. Only 9 games for Grill last season before, unfortunately, he injured his wrist and ended his season. But the previous 2 seasons at Iowa State, Grill had shot nearly 37% from 3, nearly 35% the previous season at Iowa State in Ames. So Grill has been, I would say, a solidly above average three-point shooter during most of his career. I wouldn't say he's a great shooter, though. So let's not expect a 40% Kobe Brown, Demoy Hodge type of season from Grill. If we get it, hey, that'd be fantastic. I'm not saying that's out of the realm of possibility, but I think more realistically, we should hope for maybe about 35-36% from Caleb Grill from 3. And if we get that from him, then I think we'll be very happy with Grill, because he's not just a three-point shooter. He's a rebounder, a defender, a hustler, maybe even an irritant, as some people would say, in sort of the Jason Sutherland mold from back in the day. So I'm definitely still bullish on Caleb Grill. Again, the one other factor that I would worry about, Grill's season previously at Iowa State was cut short by a back injury. Well, again, another injury this past season. Is Grill's aggressive physical style brand of basketball, does that make him more prone to injury? Hopefully it's just been bad luck the past couple seasons, and Grill will put a full season of production together for Dennis Gates and the Tigers. So, with all that being said, I want to talk more Missouri football and just football in general coming up on the show, including why Georgia not allowing a single punt return last season. That is a real stat that I heard during the Georgia-Clemson game. I had to look it up. I found that so unbelievable. Well, it's true. Georgia did not allow one punt return last season. What in the heck are we going to do about this trend in football moving forward? Well, let's talk about that here in just a second. But first, it's Ultimate College Football. I want to take a moment to give my Locked On Mizzou listeners a heads up about Ultimate College Football HC, a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love. An amazing simulation that lets you step into the shoes of a real head coach. Lead your program to glory. Imagine taking the Tigers to the title. Will you be able to handle the pressure of recruiting, hiring a staff, overseeing your training camps? Here's what I love about the game, though. All offensive plays are called by you, so your strategy will not only determine the success of the season, but it will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free with no ads and is 100% playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want and when you want. And of course, we have a special offer, for my listeners. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store and receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. And if you haven't watched NFL preseason football, well, Thursday's Chiefs opener against Baltimore will probably be your first opportunity to see the NFL's new kickoff rules in action. And obviously it looks very different. People are resistant to change, especially on something they love, like football and the NFL. But I have to say, the one thing that's gotten me is, hey, haven't kickoffs gotten so utterly boring in recent years? 80+% kickoff, touchback percentage. I don't think there was a single kickoff returned in the Super Bowl this past year, just for example. Well, my whole thing is, if you don't like that rule, fine. Just give me a solution, though. Don't just criticize it. Give me an alternative that you like better. And if the alternative is, if your idea is, hey, move the kickoff back 5 yards, move it back 10 yards, so teams actually have a return. The kickoff return's an exciting play. Let's get it back in the game. I'd actually be all for that. The problem is, I think the NFL Players Union would probably push back against that type of change, because it seems like a lot of the focus with the new kickoff rules is not just actually having a live football, an actual football play decide field position, which I'm all for, but obviously it's also injury and concussion prevention as well. And simply moving the kickoff back 5 to 10 yards, well, that's actually going to increase concussions and injuries from what we've seen the last few years on kickoff plays. So that's probably a bit of a non-starter. Fortunately or unfortunately, I just think that's the reality of the union and players, the league and players union dynamic right now. I will say this, one of the big problems with those NFL rules too, onside kicks, no surprise onside kicks like we saw Missouri and Murray State. That takes an exciting element out of the game as well. I don't have a great solution to that. Some people have said, hey, an offensive snap, it's basically a do-or-die 4th and 15, 4th and 20 type of play. First of all, to me, 4th and 15, not long enough. Got to at least be 4th and 20 to be sort of the equivalent of picking up an onside kick. Even that almost seems just in terms of compared to recovering an onside kick, even 4th and 20 For, say, those Kansas City Chiefs, for example, that does almost seem too easy. But obviously, college has stuck with the old school kickoff return rules this season. And, well, it's not going to be real exciting. I got a spoiler alert for you. But one thing I've come to realize is that punting is every bit as boring, if not more so. I noticed last season, this offseason, I didn't even realize how this trend had gone until I started talking more about Luther Burden and whether or not he should return punts for the Tigers this season. Well, quite honestly, if Burden is the most reliable guy to catch the ball back there, then he should be back there, because that absolutely is your number one goal at this point. Because I started to realize, wait a second, Missouri as a team only returned, I believe, 8 punts on the season. Maybe it was 9. I know it was single digits. That's the point. So fewer than 1 punt return average per game on the season. That's every bit as bad, if not worse, than kickoffs. And I really realized how bad it had gotten when listening to the Georgia-Clemson broadcast. Well, the play-by-play announcer pointed out that not a single punt was returned against Georgia last season. When I heard that, my ears perked up, and I went, can that possibly be true? Not 1 punt? Well, I looked it up, and sure enough, it was true. Georgia, the previous season, they won the national championship, and it allowed just 6 punts returned on the entire season. And again, last season, it's true. I verified it. 0 punts returned for Georgia opponents on the entire season. So a bunch of bounces out of bounds, a bunch of fair catches. Boy, that's really thrilling stuff, isn't it? So the problem is here, I have zero idea of what to do about that. If punters have just gotten that good and coverage has just gotten that good, I'm not really sure what rule change you can actually implement to make that play more exciting again. Because to me, the return game, whether it's punts or it's kickoffs, one of the most exciting plays in all of football, that just because of well, frankly, just kickers getting better and better and better, coaches getting smarter, special teams players getting faster and all that good stuff. There's a whole bunch of different reasons for this, but unfortunately, it's just resulting in, frankly, a lot of boring special teams football these days. I don't really have a solution to any of the punt return problems here. I'd love to hear if any of you have any ideas, because frankly, I'm at a bit of a loss here. I just know that I would like to see the return element, the special teams element of football be more emphasized again. I just don't have a great solution in terms of rule changes on the punting end. But hey, thanks as always for joining me here on Locked On Mizzou. I'll be back tomorrow with you. More Mizzou football talk. And until then, I am John Miller. Thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.